Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to ParenTIPS Unpacked. Let's get real about parenting. This is the first lunchtime webinar that Singapore Children's Society is hosting for the year. And I'm very, very excited and delighted to see many of you in the hundreds joining us today. My name is Lin Xiaoling. I'm from the Singapore Children's Society. And I will introduce the panelists in just a while. But before I do that, I want to thank all of you for taking time to join us for the next hour to learn a little bit more about parenting. No matter who you are, whether you are a mother, father, a grandparent, or just an auntie and uncle who's very interested and want to be that supportive environment for children. Wherever you are, whether you are, having your lunch over, your office table, whether maybe you are in the midst of a commute to pick up your children, to run errands, thank you for tuning in. And before we begin, I would like to encourage you to also share this link with a friend, or if you're in the office and you're having lunch together with your colleagues and you know that they are fellow parents as well, please share this webinar with them, watch together with them. So as you fuel up with your lunch and the food, we hope to provide some emotional sustenance along the way. Why are we doing this, a webinar, right? Because we know that today there's a lot of parenting information, overwhelming amount. So it can be both empowering, but also confusing at times. So we wanted to bring this lunchtime parenting conversations to more parents because, in the social service sector, I think we are very fortunate. On and off, we will have a lot of chit-chats with our colleagues who happen to be social workers, counselors. So they're in a very good space to give us the advice. Sometimes we will just check with them, oh, this is happening to my child, what should I do? And that is happening, how do I take care of myself? So we hope to be able to bring these conversations from our offices into this lunchtime webinar just for you. What can you expect? I'm sorry, we don't have any magic formulas to share. We will be dropping some tips along the way. But most importantly, I think we want all of you to know that you are not alone in this parenting journey. And there's a lot of support out there. So we hope to bring that support to you as well. This year, for Children's Society, we do hope to bring you 3 parenting webinars like this, lunchtime webinars. So you have a chance to co-create and co-shape this together with us. At the end of the session, there'll be a feedback form. So that's the best time for you to let us know what topics you're interested in so that we can design and shape the subsequent sessions just for you. All right, I've said a lot, right? So I'm sure all of you will be very excited to meet our panelists for today. So I'll do a quick round of introductions. I'm very happy and very honored to have Minister of State Sun Xueling with us this afternoon.
Thank you.
So MOS Sun is currently the Minister of State for the Ministry of Home Affairs and Ministry of Social and Family Development. And she was previously the Minister of State at the Ministry of Education as well. MOS Sun is a mother to 2 young girls.
Yes.
Right. Thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you.
Yeah. And next up, we have Dr. Chong Hoi Shan. Hoi Shan is a familiar face with Children's Society. She's our long-standing volunteer, and she also currently sits on the research committee. But in her professional setting, she is an assistant professor at the Psychology and Child and Human Development Academic Group of the National Institute of Education, Nanyang Technological University. And Hoi Shan also has a teenage daughter.
Yes.
Thank you, Hoi Shan.
Yeah.
And last but not least, we have Ms. Gloria Ng. She is the Deputy Director and Head of Student Service at Singapore Children's Society. And that is the center that actually runs our Tinkle Friend helpline and chat line. So while Gloria has no kids of her own, but she has had a lot of experience, understanding the struggles that parents have come to Tinkle Friend for, even though Tinkle Friend is not a helpline meant for parents. So we will be able to hear more from her this afternoon as well. Okay. Now, I think some of you might be curious, who is it amongst the audience with us today? So I'll just give a little, kind of scan of the profile. About 3/4 of today's participants are parents, guardians, and grandparents. Most of them have children below the age of 12 years old. And majority of them have 1 to 2 children. So you can see this is really the state of, how our family structure is right now. And let's dive straight into this afternoon's topic, right? And we have kept it really, really broad for the first webinar. It's on parental stress and parental well-being. And I think even before we start today's session, we already have parents who are keying in questions. How do I juggle? There's so many things that I have to look out for. And we know that parenting is really one of the most difficult jobs in the world, but also the most rewarding, right?
Yeah, it is.
And one more thing that's very rarely said, right? It is also undertaken with the least amount of training, right? How many of us are fully prepared to be parents? We learn on the way, so a lot of it is really on the job. Now, all of us here, we are working very hard, right, to aspire to create the best environment for our children. But I think we need to really keep at the back of our minds that there's no perfect parent, there's also no perfect child, right? And in fact, research has also kind of termed modern day parents as being in a state of intensive parenting.
Yes.
Maybe that's what we are feeling today, right? We are constantly pulled in many, many different directions because it is a very child-centered approach given the small family size that demands a lot of time, a lot of finances, and a lot of emotional investments as well, right? And Singapore, specific to our context, we know that 60% of our married couple households have both spouses working, right? So along with the caregiving burdens and stresses, there's also all this work, stresses that we have to also manage and juggle at the same time. But at Children's Society, we really believe that parents who are well will be able to parent well, which is why we have decided to shine the spotlight of the first webinar session of today, of this year, in fact, to be looking at parents and also how do we take care of ourselves, right? So without further ado, I'm just going to dive right in because I've spoken too much, right? And I'm going to give a chance to our panelists to say something. But before I do that, right, can I request to put on the slide that shows the parenting quote from our fellow panelists. So you see on the screen right here, the quotes that we have gotten before the session from MOS Soon, from Hoishan, as well as Gloria. And let's not go into, unpicking every single word. But if I could just invite MOS Soon to share with us, why is it that, you have these words, be present, in your quote?
I think it comes back to the point about parents being very busy. Many parents are working at the same time that they have caregiving responsibilities. Maybe not just for children, but also perhaps senior parents who are staying with them, or even senior parents who are not staying with them, but they have to find ways to toggle their time. So sometimes I think when we are hurrying from point A to point B, we perhaps might be outcome focused. And the outcome might be, I need to get here at what time, I need to get my child to tuition, I need to get my child, so you have the end destination in mind, but actually what is important perhaps is that journey in between. So for example, when we are on the way, let's say on a regular commute with a child, whether you're driving or you're taking a bus or whatsoever, rather than be focused on, am I going to be this, am I going to be late, like what you said, right? There's no perfect parent, no perfect child. Right? There's no perfect situation. But if along the way, we actually value that time that we're spending with one another, and that's what I mean by being present with the child, I think that in itself is something that is very meaningful and strengthens the bond between child and parent without us realizing it. So that was what I had in mind when I talked about being present. So it can take place anytime. And I'm not talking about teachable moments because if we keep thinking, is this a teachable moment for my child? Is that a teachable moment for my child? Then I think you're creating undue stress on ourselves. So I'm not talking about teachable moments. I'm talking about enjoying the moment. And I think when you enjoy the moments you have with your children know that. They feel it. Right? And that, in a way, is that intrinsic sense of being loved and being cared for that they'll remember. So that's what I mean by the quote.
Oh, it's a very nice reminder to all of us, right? It's really not the end destination that matters, but really along the way, how many flowers have you smelled, right? How many buses can you count? It really matters that they will stick in the child's mind as they grow up, right? Thanks, MOS. Let's turn the camera maybe to Gloria, right? Because Gloria, in her quote, she mentioned about the village. So, I mean, it's often said, right, it takes a village to raise a child. But how do we build that village? How do we build that kampong that really will be a very supportive environment for our children?
Yes. So for me, actually, I believe that when it comes to parenting, so I have friends who are married and they have children. And one of the things I realized is that the moment they have a kid, their life revolves around the kid. So what time is their nap? What time are they going to eat? And so there was one day my friend asked me, hey, let's meet for lunch. Let's meet over like from 12 to 1. Then I was like, 12 to 1, I'm working. Like I I'm working. And then he was like, but that's the only time I have, because after that my child has to go and eat, and after that my child has to take a nap. And that was when I realized that a lot of times they start to get a bit more lonely in the parenting journey, because oftentimes they're trying to work around the schedule of their children. But then what about the relationship that they have with the larger community, with their extended family, with their friends? And so one day I was just like, hey, you know what? I will cook for your kid. Come to my house. I will cook for your child. Let's spend a bit more time, but you can talk to me as well. And that was when he was like, oh, okay. And so there were like many requests, like, can you make sure there's no salt? Can you make sure there's no that? But I felt that I can accommodate that. And I thought that was very refreshing for him, that someone was willing to extend that care, not just towards him, but to the entire family. And I thought that brought a lot of joy and a sense of like a break in the monotony. Yeah, so I felt that when it comes to parenting, oftentimes while there's a lot of joy, there's also a sense of a loneliness, also because there's a change in the schedule, there's a change in your routine as well. And I think that can really empower and really uplift parents when they know that they're not alone in this journey. Yeah.
I love the story that you shared, Gloria. When can I go to your home for lunch?
Chicken.
So I think it's really, again, it's back to the little things, right? Because you don't have to run a big errand for the parent. Sometimes it's just offering to say, hey, can I cook you a meal and just come and hang out together? That can really increase that sense of connection and the bonds between, the village, right? The villagers living there. So thanks, Gloria, for sharing that. And then we go to Hoshan, right?
Yes.
Hoshan, for you, I picked up this phrase here, being kind to ourselves.
Yes.
Why does it matter to you?
Being kind to ourselves, because we talk about, parenting. Nobody gives us training. No university in the world teaches you how to be a parent, right? They teach you to be a human, maybe, right? To be empathetic, to be compassionate. But sometimes we forget, right, that we need to be having some kind of self-compassion as well. Compassionate to others, but at the same time, also acknowledging that this is really one of the toughest jobs on earth, right? That we don't have training for it necessarily. We learn on the job. And the important thing is, I think in our societal context, there's just so many competing demands. Female labor force participation is very high in Singapore. And so parents are not just parents. And I highlighted female just because that in our society, the job usually falls on the shoulders of the mother. So it's hard. And it's important, right, to imagine and to think about, I'm not just a mother or just a parent at home. I have other demands. I'm also a child to somebody else, elderly people to take care of. And the demands and expectations for parenting is very, very high. It's what we call a time-intensive parenting. This is really the buzzword in recent years, right? Just because we have such high expectation for child achievement and child development, and it's almost always that the job of making sure that the child turn out well almost always falls on the parents. And so there is this saying that goes, right, my child is my report card. Yeah, it's almost like what the child turns out, how the child turns out is a reflection of who am I as a person, as a parent. I mean, not necessarily I endorsing this, but when we speak with parents, even in the research space, right, it's like, I am very invested in the parenting role just because I want my child to do well. We're not just talking about academic achievement, right? So I want my child to do well, even as a person, to be kind and all sorts of things. And then who else to do that, to nurture that or to facilitate that, but the parents, right? It's a tall order.
Right.
Yeah, so I just feel that sometimes we need to take pause and know that this is a big job. And it's fine, right? It's probably okay if we take it a little bit slower, make some mistakes along the way. It's totally okay.
Actually, I read something yesterday, and it's perfectly in line with what Hoi Shan just shared. What I read in this book basically says that we learn throughout our lives to be compassionate to others, but sometimes we forget that we have to be compassionate towards ourselves. And the book was in Chinese, so it was something to the effect of 我们学会怎么去慈悲对待别人。 那我们要学会放过自己。
let go of yourself.
You know, to be kind to ourselves. You know? And so I think it's a good reminder. Yes, that we shouldn't punish ourselves.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Anyway,
it's
sorry, it just
really
reminded me
good
of something I read last
reminder.
night.
If I
It's
could
really
write
great.
on
Yeah,
also,
Gloria.
it's also that modeling the courage to be imperfect. You know, we don't always have to be perfect, but actually we are telling the children that in modeling that sense about we don't always get it right, they can also don't always get things right. And that's how we learn. So rather than see it as a mistake, what if it becomes a learning opportunity?
Right.
Actually, if you don't mind me interjecting also, I think there may be several questions about screen time and so on and so forth.
Right,
Right?
yeah.
I think one of the stresses of being a parent nowadays, and this is what I saw online, you mentioned the term intensive parenting,
Yes.
right? Because there's so much information on Instagram and everything, right? That parents sometimes have this expectation or they set a certain high bar for themselves that people are doing this online, what they call gentle parenting. Or in the past, it
lot
was
of
tiger
buzzwords,
mom.
right?
Oh,
Yeah, a lot of buzzwords, yeah.
Nowadays, it's like what gentle parenting, like I don't know, it's like supposed to be an elephant parenting or something, you know. Then last time it was the tiger mom, you know, that kind of thing, right? And then there are certain standards, so to speak. And then everybody's putting on these Instagrammable moments or pictures or whatsoever of what you do with your child. And then subconsciously, parents, and perhaps then you also expect that of your children, that I think that we should be like what I saw on this perfect picture or this perfect video.
Yeah.
You know? And that creates stress for yourself and for the child.
Yeah.
Coming back to what you said, this idea of a perfect parent, perfect child.
Yeah.
So
we all need to recognize that whatever we see on, Instagram, Facebook, people put up nice pictures.
Yeah,
and, nice stories that, they might have with their children, but it may not fully reflect the reality. Like, I know you're bursting to say something.
This is the season, because I go on social media, so right. This is the
Yes.
season where people show pictures of children shaking hands.
Oh, yes, I think educational awards.
Education, yes.
EduSave,
And
yes.
I sometimes I'm happy for my friends' children's achievement,
Yes,
right? But
yes.
I mean, I also cannot help but think that, it is hard, right? That to be. What if my child didn't get an award, right? And then to be able to see is that, so many of my friends, the children are doing well and all that, right? So it might create some form of stress as well. But this is just a personal take on,
Yeah,
on
definitely.
That, yeah.
So all these external influences, there's just a lot of stresses, not just from work, but from the expectations that we think society places on us,
Yeah.
that
Yes.
on other parents, you hear of things that your friends are doing. Oh, am I doing enough for my child?
Yes.
Right? Okay, but I want to turn the direction back on the spotlight on our own well-being, right? Because I think one of even the questions that's coming in here
Yes.
is really talking about that we have to constantly juggle a lot of things, right? So that's this parenting role strain. Like you are a parent, just now you said, I'm also a daughter. I have to deal with caregiving for my elderly parents. I'm an employee. I need to put in my best at work. I am a wife to my husband. How do we maintain that harmonious relationship? So we are being put in so many different directions. Of course, the husbands are also put in different directions, right, as well. And I think as we were taking in registration, we asked parents, what are some of the challenges that you face? So a lot of them said, managing our time and energies between work, between housework, between quality time with each child, and sufficient rest for ourselves. See, the self is always the last.
Yeah.
So how do we kind of unpack these stressors, and what advice might be able to give, or maybe just share some of the things that we've been doing that help us do this constant juggling and taking care of ourselves?
It's funny, right, when we take a plane and they always say, take care of yourself first before you take care of others. But, we never remind ourselves that self-care comes first, right? Because with self-care, you are just a better version of yourself in providing or fulfilling that parenting role, right?
How do you do self-care?
Yeah, how do I do self-care? I think carving out enough time, easier said than done. To be honest, I mean, I say it with a little bit of nonchalance now because, as some of you may know, my daughter is already 18 years old. So I mean, very different sets of challenges right now. But I think growing up, as she was growing up, it was really being very intentional about, I need to take this walk right now by the river. And I just need to drop everything and I need to just go and have a walk on my own, get an ice cream or whatever, right? Just being very intentional without feeling that getting away from this space for the next 20 or 30 minutes without feeling that guilt, and nothing will happen to your child, right? Nothing big will happen to their development in the long term, if anything at all. That little space or little time off would actually make me a better parent when I go back, to that space. Yeah.
Just taking a step back, kind of like composing yourself and then facing up the responsibilities.
There's a lot of guilt and in between as well, right? But I think over time we just have to kind of let yourself go, right? Let yourself off, right? It's fine, right? 20 minutes, 30 minutes of self-me time. What would it do to your child, right, in terms of development?
MOS?
Yeah. If I could add, I think we might need to remind ourselves that children are very resilient. They're resilient in their own way, right? They can be resilient in a certain way at 7. So you don't expect the 18-year-old type of resilience on the 7-year-old child.
Yes.
But it doesn't mean that a 7-year-old child is not resilient.
Yeah.
It's just at different age groups, age levels, they are resilient in their own way. But they are resilient. So I think one of the problems that many parents face, including myself, sometimes we're worried about letting our children do nothing. We feel that their time must be occupied all the time.
To be productive and fruitful.
To be productive and fruitful. Yes. And it has to be quantifiable. Like, how many pages of the assessment book did you do in that 1 hour that mommy wasn't around? Or like, did you spend your time doing, cool bits online for student learning space? Or, we sort of assess the child's productivity by how we assess labor productivity amongst adults, right?
True.
Right. I mean, I could talk forever about industrial revolution, industrialization, and how we all went to factory from farm, and then how we that kind of thing. Right? We don't go there. Okay? But somehow that kind of mental mind frame has kind of translated in some ways into our assessment of productivity. And we kind of expect that from our children, even though we don't actually say it, but we kind of expect it. And once we try to measure productivity in that way, we are very afraid to have empty periods of time. Where the child seems to be doing nothing but play with a toy, or daydream or something. Then you're like, oh my God, I'm not doing my part as a parent. That was a potentially teachable learning moment. So I think maybe we should just take a step back. If we allow the child some free time, we also in that process allow ourselves some free time. So it works both ways.
Yeah.
Because as long as you think that your child's time needs to be meaningfully occupied all the time, right, you will feel that stress of having to be there to juggle the child, spending that time productively.
Yeah.
Then you'll never have time for yourself.
Yeah.
So I think it has to work both ways.
So separating KPI, key performance indicators from work and at home, right? Having different sets of KPIs for children.
Yeah. We seem to have subconsciously kind of worked this KPI into our time with our children.
Yeah.
It's not productive at the end of the day, right? Because you end up...
Sometimes it might be counterproductive.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. As a researcher.
I take walks in the river too.
So I think there's this sense of like, you let yourself off, right? 放过自己. And you also need to slowly let our children go. Let go, right, of the rein that we don't have to control every single thing that they're doing and be very upset or like, hyper vigilant over, their every action, or am I wasting their time by not meaningfully occupying their time with another enrichment class, with another online session, for instance? Yeah.
And sometimes I worry, right, because we all know society, all sorts of things, economy is evolving, right, very quickly, right? And you are not able to actually say, even the researchers, you can't actually scientifically say that because my child spent X number of hours doing this, that actually this will then be positively correlated to higher probability of success come adulthood. We like to think that actually there is such a causation. But, education and, growing up and that interrelationship with, the world around them, and the world is changing very quickly. Unfortunately, this linear equation, I don't think it exists. I'm not saying it totally doesn't exist. There's probably at some level, a general trajectory in one direction, but it is not linear, like a straight line.
Yeah.
Like X number of hours means X probability of success.
The more the
Yeah.
merrier.
Ah,
Right?
so I think if we perhaps unhinge ourselves from this idea that it is totally positively linearly correlated, right? That then I think we may take a step back and say, actually, there might be different methods that work. And perhaps giving each other some time off might actually be positive for the child.
It's really nice to see economics concept being
Sorry,
applied to parenting. No,
she's a researcher. She's a researcher.
Yeah. Last week I was just at a research seminar, and they say, all the linear models that we're talking about, right? Okay, the more of this, the better. Let's say if you're a bit more, sensitive towards your child, then maybe there will be, better social emotional well-being or whatever, or better achievement outcome, right? Academic achievement. Nobody has ever considered it can be a curvilinear relationship, right? That it doesn't go this way, but it can go down and then go down again, right? Just because, maybe
in layman terms for sure.
maybe at that point of the tip and it goes down, that is where your parental burnout. Right? When you have parental burnout,
right?
it becomes like, then you have all the other things that, would actually be worse off for your child.
But I know that the questions coming in, and I think people are looking for concrete steps and actions, right, that they can take. So for instance, the question here, how can parents with multiple children, the keyword multiple, children, toggle between work, schoolwork, and caregiving? I wonder whether we have around the table any practical, concrete steps that we want to share.
Gloria, you talk to
the
parents.
I mean, before we jump on the question, I wanted to add on from a child's perspective, because I work a lot with children, right? So in one of the sessions that I was having with children, I asked them to draw their family. So we call that like kinetic family drawing. So everyone in the family needs to be doing. And it's very interesting because when it came to like often the parents, they could draw the parents in multiple scenarios, and they're always doing something. They're always washing, they're always cleaning, they're always cooking, they're always doing something. But when the child, they say like, they draw themselves and they say, I'm doing nothing. And then so when we actually sometimes we do share that with the parents are like, so what is my child doing? And oftentimes we also wanted to highlight that actually the child is observing you. And when we ask also when I asked the child, what do you hope that your parents could be doing? And they said, doing nothing with me.
Yeah.
And that's actually, I think that's similar to what, like the quote that you actually raised up about, being present with the child in every moment. It's not just about doing something, but it's even in the seemingly mundane, the seemingly insignificant moments can become very significant to a child. Because I think we need to also remember that a children is perpetually observing you, but they are also interpreting the world. And so when a child continues to observe you and what they interpret the world is that our parents are busy, So that is, I'm not saying it's accurate, but that's the perception that they sometimes form. Yeah, so when I can imagine also as parents, they're also juggling many things, not just work. I can also imagine, so I work a lot with families where the mothers may be homemakers as well. When I ask them, how is your day? And they tell me a whole laundry list of things that they did from, I woke up at 7 a.m. and then I sent my first child to school, and then followed by that, I did this.
Yes, they're very busy.
They're very busy. They're as busy as me. In fact, more busy than me, in fact. And I think it's really that sense about, when we think about juggling, I really truly believe that every parent is really doing the best that they can. And they are also expecting and desiring the best for the children as well. And so when we think about desiring the best, we need to remember that it's always about in context. The best for my child in this particular context is also that sense about I want them to be able to learn responsibility. And what's best for my child is also the ability to have fun and play as well. And sometimes I think when we think about the best for the children, we always think about I need to choose one over the other, when it could be both. I could be actually, I want my child to learn responsibility. And so I will set the standards that, after you're done with dinner, you have to put the plates into the sink, and at the same time, when you're done with it, you can go and play, which is actually the best for the child to learn both responsibility and have time for yourself as a child, to be able to do your homework, to be able to do nothing. I think that is something that we also want to be able to encourage parents to consider about, what are also your battles. I can imagine every day you're thinking about 10 million things, of what decisions have to be made, etc. But I think it's also that sense about being kind to yourself, that not in all situations you're going to have the best outcome that you are desiring, can we also allow our children the opportunity to learn very natural consequences, logical consequences? If I fail to do my homework, I will get the consequences of my teacher scolding me tomorrow. Very logical. If I'm not going to hold the plates well, there will be some food that will drop on the floor. And the consequence is not mommy will clean up. The consequence is I have to clean up, because I made that mess. Yeah. So I'm also wondering, and I guess encourage parents to also consider how can we look at logical consequences and see it as learning opportunities.
Yeah. So I think, what I've been hearing so far is that sometimes as parents, right, we want our children to be productive. So a lot of times, many parents, I think, would set timetables for the children. Right. So at certain time you do this, certain time after that you revise this. But actually as parents, I realize we are quite poor in drawing boundaries sometimes, which is why then that juggling between the various responsibilities, we find that it kind of like, can sip into another responsibility and we realize that, how come I have no time? Yeah. So I'm just wondering, the part about how can we concretely, right, share with parents? Is it about, take away from today, even spending time doing nothing is actually something that your child would remember and appreciate you for. So it doesn't have to be big amounts of time that you're going to be carving out every day to spend with your child. Or every day I have to, do like a 1 hour homework or be there for my child. But sometimes it's as simple as, okay, shall we prepare the meal together? And at the same time, you are preparing dinner for your family and you get to have that bonding session together with the child. Yeah. So I wonder whether that's something, or do you have any more ideas and tips about, this juggling? How do we go about? Because we are all so busy, and I'm sure both of you as well.
I don't mean to talk about research, but going back to this idea about doing nothing, right? Or when children are daydreaming, they're not exactly doing nothing. Their brains are connecting dots between situations, a little bit like the logical consequences that Gloria was talking about. They're still, you must imagine, to children, the world is this amazing place filled with things that they've never seen before.
Yeah.
Right? And every day they're observing, they're trying to make sense. Actually, why did mommy say this? Actually, why did my friend in school do that? Actually, by doing A, what happened? Why did B happen? That kind of thing. They actually need time to process these things. And if we are constantly hassling and doing things concretely, actually children may not have the time to process these thoughts, right? Or to even experiment. Like maybe they will see certain behaviors in school and then they may go to the playground and then they might unconsciously, subconsciously practice it. And then a certain result happens. Actually, all these are learning points, but we don't call it like this is lesson number 1 for this hour that my child is learning this. So I just want to come back to the point that doing nothing doesn't mean that the child is not developing. So we should just give ourselves a break, and not try to overpopulate time for ourselves and our children. I think once we get that into our mind frame, we can feel a little less stressed.
Breathe easier.
Breathe easier, yes. And just know and be assured and confident that actually your child is resilient, your child is developing well. Especially in an environment like Singapore, where generally there's safety, there's security, and people are kind, and there's a conducive environment to bring up children. I think once we are able to, because if a question is phrased, how do I juggle between A, B, and C? It's always zero sum, What you take from there, you add here, and we only have 24 hours a day. Right? So you will always have this net. It's a zero-sum game. And we're not talking about if I'm able to add 3 here, minus 3 here, then I'm actually better off, or plus 4 here, minus. As long as we end up in this kind of a mindset, right, we will forever feel stressed. And we'll forever feel that because I'm minus from here, then alamak, I'm not matching up to expectation here, or I'm a bad human being. I think we need to kind of 放过自己, and try not to do that.
Right.
Even though it's very human to do so. Even though it's very human to do so.
Yeah. Fashan?
I want to bring back to, multiple children, right?
Yes.
Yeah. We were talking about multiple children because we did a study together, remember, Children's Society, and we were collaborating, and then we had a chance to interview children, age I think about 9 to 11, but what it means, right, for your parents to show love, warm parental warmth. And then we picked up something very interesting. He said, when my parents give me or drive me to tuition classes. So I'm really reminded of what MOS Soon was saying, right? Driving in between classes and all that. And we thought, oh my goodness, this is so Singaporean, right? Driving to tuition, how can driving you to tuition be an act of love? But we dive a little bit deeper to realize what the children were saying. So essentially they said, in that 20 minutes of car ride, this is exclusive time that I have with
you to myself.
I have you to myself, not my brother or sister. It's just me and you. And they love it when the parents talk about their lives or ask about their lives. It's not like, oh, have you finished your homework, or what, no. Like, it's time that they feel is exclusive. Same for what children also appreciated was bedtime routine when parents put them to bed and maybe the sisters or brothers already kind of put to bed already. So it's that time that they were able to snuggle up to their parents alone.
Right.
So these are moments that they can make the connection, and that to them is a very strong act of love.
Right.
Yeah.
Thanks, Hoishan, for bringing it up, because I think it gels in very nicely with something that we've prepared for today's webinar as well. So we thought we wanted to bring in really the children and the youth voices, into this conversation, because otherwise it's always just the adults. So we did a small straw poll, right? So we asked youths, right, 2 questions, very simple. Growing up, what was something that your parents did that was helpful? And what was something that they did that was not helpful? So let's look at it, right? So this is the responses for something that the parents did that was helpful. And you can kind of see the quotes that's taken directly from the responses that you have given us on the left-hand side. But I think we summarized it. So what matters into 3 key points? The little things. And if you realize actually these little moments, little wins, little celebrations have been coming up a lot in our conversation so far. And the second thing was that care and support, that they feel from the parents. So again, it's not that big moments. It's really the little moments where the parents supported them during a very tough time, caring for them, taking care of them when they're sick. And the third one is respect. If you look at the last quote over there, talk to me like an adult. And I think here, we are not saying that, every single whim and fancy we have to give in to the child, but to really treat the child as an equal, a human being, right? How you would treat your co-workers or your bosses at work is really, that respect that we also need to be giving to our children. And that's really what they appreciated. On the flip side, okay, let's go to the next slide. What was something that parents did that was not so helpful from the perspective of youth again, right?
Yes.
So on the left, you can see the quotes that they have given us. And on the right-hand side, I think, again, we summarize into 3 key things. Firstly, being judgmental, being harsh, maybe sometimes poking fun at them when we don't mean it, but actually children feel it a lot, right? Having unrealistic expectations in terms of academic performance in this sense. And also the third point, right, disharmony in the family. Because I think just now we have been also saying, right, sometimes we are just so caught up with the day-to-day of caring for the children, ensuring that they are getting to classes on time, that we neglect people around us, people who may mean a lot, our extended family or even our spouse, right? So once that happens, actually, children can feel the disharmony and the instability in the relationships. So I think this was something that we've gathered from our youth. And I'd just like to open the conversation here. What do you all think? And if we were to frame the question around, for the things that was helpful, how can we be more conscious of doing more of those things? And for the thing that's not so helpful, how do we mindfully, kind of like reduce what we should be doing? Yeah, but to qualify, this is not a rigorous research. All right, just a very, very quick straw poll.
Yes. Let me give you I thought it was quite an interesting example from a few years back. So, in Singapore, many families, once in a while, we like to bring our children away for a holiday, right? Overseas, So I think my children were probably about 1 6-year-old, another maybe 9-year-old, So we went overseas for a holiday. We had to take the plane, and it was like a 5-6 day trip. And at the end of the trip, I asked my children, what was the most memorable part of the holiday? Right? I thought maybe it was this theme park ride, it was this water slide, I had all these ideas, right? Then my child said, packing my clothes and taking the taxi to the airport.
Wait, to the airport to leave Singapore or come back?
No, to the airport, to leave Singapore. And they both earnestly looked at me and said, Like that was, so
Wow.
actually I could have packed the bag, go to the airport.
And not go,
and not gone anywhere.
And just go to Jewel.
And just come home, And I was like, huh? And I actually asked them, I said, why? So it actually goes back to the little things and the care and support, because they went through this process of, should I choose t-shirt A, choose t-shirt B? And they actually were involved and they spent time packing their little suitcase, discussing this holiday that they were going to go for. And of course, mommy was there to also help to pack their bag with them to say, hey, you need X number of socks, right? Because you need to. So they enjoyed that process. And getting into a taxi with their luggage case, they felt this was, I'm going somewhere, I'm exciting. And then after that, right, because it was a foreign place, they had no time to process because all new, they just went for one ride, another ride, then suddenly come home ready. Then actually all they remembered, I like the packing of the suitcase and getting into the taxi. So ever since that episode, I told my husband, I'm not going to bring my children far.
no more holidays.
No more. Go Bintang, go Batam, come back. Can really. The important part is the packing of the suitcase.
I think that's really so nice to hear. Go for our pockets as well. Because I think, again, right, as adults, we have all this like, I'm going to save up a lot of money to bring my child to this wonderful place. Sometimes we are projecting our own, what we didn't have in our childhood on our children.
Yes.
And we think that, hey, by bringing you to this faraway place, you will definitely enjoy.
Yeah.
But they enjoy packing the luggages.
Yeah, so once I actually brought further, right, this was before I learned my lesson, right? So all the child remembered was, because when you go somewhere far, it means that there's a time difference. Children don't take to time differences very well, right? So they feel groggy the whole day. And my children don't like the cold. So if there's a change very drastically in their routine, actually some of those things they perhaps really don't enjoy. So anyway, coming back right to the main topic, right? Yep, I totally agree. Little things.
Yeah. How about you?
Oh, no, that's so nice to hear, right? Because people tend to feel that, again, the social media, right? People like to post pictures in December, November period of fanciful places that they take their children to. And I sometimes wonder, what happened to the many, many families who are maybe not able to have the time, not able to have the resources to do that, right? But it's nice. Actually, children don't. It's really our parents' expectations of ourselves, right? Oh, we have to do this. It's like, again, KPI, right? I have to bring them far away. I have to have this wonderful holiday, very Instagrammable, so as to become or shown or demonstrate to be a good parent. But actually, the kids don't care, right? They may not care so much at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I guess also because they're looking at it from a larger adult viewpoint.
Yes,
So you're
yes,
thinking about, I'm giving them a life experience of seeing something outside of Singapore. That's what you're trying to give them.
Yes.
But for them, it's also like, Singapore and my world is big enough. I'm still trying to understand what is in this world. So I was also thinking, recently I moved house and then my house had the bare minimal, had a chair, had dining table, sofa, that's about it. And I invited my nieces and nephews over and they love it. And I said, what do you like about my house? And they said, because he invited me. So it felt special, the fact that I didn't choose someone else, but I chose them to come over to my place where I have no child toys, I have nothing much, but for them it was that I would choose them. Yeah, and so then they figured things out themselves. Yes, so they play hide and seek and they said this is the best place to play hide and seek. It's like, that's great. And I thought it's novel, it's maybe the first time, but we've done it for 5-6 times and it is still the best place to play hide and seek. So I think it's really the little things. I was also reflecting because my team actually runs the Think a Friend helpline and chat line. And, you talk about what are the more unhelpful things. I think that came out quite a bit on the Think a Friend helpline and chat line. So oftentimes when we ask the children, who else knows about this? Oftentimes what we are starting to realize is that a lot of children desire to actually share with their parents about what is happening. But there are some perceive and some real barriers that they actually face. The sense about, will my parents judge me? Will they be there for me? What would they think about my experience? We talk about laughing at our children. So that was something that also came out sometimes where children felt that I told them about that and they laughed at me. They laughed at my experience. And I can remember also the times where, when my nieces fell and I laughed because to me it felt, it's quite funny. But the moment I laughed, they cried, because to them it was like, do I feel judged? Because once again, it goes back to children are perpetually observing the world. So when I see you laughing, are you thinking that I made a mistake? Are you thinking that I'm silly? When actually I was trying to do that to show my autonomy. I was doing that to show my independence. I was doing that to show you that I can do it. Yeah. So I think from a child's perspective and an adult's perspective, it often differs. And that is when we want to be able to understand the experience. I do want to add on also that parents will make the mistakes. Parents will laugh. Parents will sometimes not be available, not because they don't want to be, but because they're busy at that moment, attending to something else. And it's okay, because I also think relationships can be repaired. I think that's something I believe in. I mean, if you think about it, I have a lot of friends. Do we have a rosy relationship? Not all the time. There are times in which we fight, we argue, we disagree. And I think in a parent-child relationship, even though it is your child, you can also expect that we are going to be different because this is someone else, this is someone new. I remember that when I was doing kids start work, and one of them actually, one of the child actually said, how come the tree, there's a tree that is over there, but all the leaves are different shades of green? I was like, that's a great question. I have no idea why. But it also reminded me about how children come from parents, but every child is going to be unique, it's going to be different. And even though we thought that this is my child, they are going to have their own personality, they are going to have their own quirks, they are all going to have their own strengths as well.
Yeah. So I want to come. Oh, sorry, Hoshan, would you want to add on first?
No, questions. There are questions on the questions on the board that we want to address, right?
Yeah. So I thought actually this is the question about, how can we find our support and village? I think it's important because like one of the participants asked, how about parents who don't have a village? Sometimes we take for granted, if we need help, extended family is always there, and we can, kind of like tap on them to help us juggle our kids for a little while. But what about parents who do not have that village to lean back on? So I think in this question, it is about, finding help, finding support. How do we as a community actually step in, right, to help parents around us? Yeah, I wonder whether we have got anything to share on this.
I don't have an ideal answer for it, but I'm very grateful because I live with my mother-in-law. I hear that it's not very common nowadays, but I live with my mother-in-law. I have a very, very helpful husband. Let's not forget husbands in this equation. Yes.
Very much so.
There are some things sometimes that women feel that we can do better than husbands, but there are also opportunities for husbands to play a role.
Oh, to be fair, I think fathers in Singapore are really stepping up to the game. I see a lot of fathers being very hands-on.
Yes. So I think when we talk about village, of course, like I said, I'm very grateful because I'm very fortunate because I have a very helpful husband and I stay with my mother-in-law. And, that's like, it's rare. Family, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and they're willing to do something, knowing that actually I've got two children and they're both under 12. So actually quite fits the demographics that we have today. But I acknowledge that there will be parents who may not have that support system with them. And maybe sometimes I feel that when people get married or when they start thinking of having children, sometimes along the way when we make decisions, we may have to consider how can we make those decisions thinking about how we can create that community or that ecosystem. So for instance, I've seen situations, I'm not saying many, but there are situations, because at MSF I know this. There have been occasions where parents, for instance, they do desire for their children to go to certain schools, rightly or wrongly, right? And those schools may be far away from their existing networks. So sometimes when you make decision A, it impacts decision B. There are trade-offs. Unfortunately, that is in life. So we have to ask ourselves, when we make a certain decision to do certain things with our children, or to live in certain places, or to live away from our parents, or actually making a conscious decision not to stay with our in-laws or our parents. It's a variety, right? That there will be corresponding outcomes, right? And I think maybe another way to look at it is that it is not possible to score 100 points for everything. It's not possible to say, I will be at this school, my child will be like that, my mother-in-law will be like this.
Perfect report
There's
card.
no perfect report card. Everybody will fall short. Right? And how, when in the process of falling short, we're still able to live with the consequences. And I think actually we are really quite fortunate in Singapore because Singapore is small.
Yeah. Still
Right.
the
proximity,
It's
right.
still possible to, to balance it out somewhat. Yeah.
I wonder if the workplace also can play a part, right? The workplace environment, right?
Yeah,
All
the flexible workplace arrangements.
flexible arrangement, and also just being kind, right? To acknowledging that the employee that comes through the door today is not just an employee, but having many
agree.
different demands, right? That I think, as much as we are compassionate towards people and ourselves, but are we able to then think about the multiple roles and demands that everybody is juggling with, and are we able to say that, yeah, that's fine, right? It's probably okay if you drop some balls, but what can I do for you, right? To help you do this job.
Yeah. I think, that's a very good point you raised. I mean, the government has been promoting flexible workplace arrangements, and the guidelines only came out in December last year on how to go about doing this. But I think if we can start off by thinking happy employee, happy staff, generally better outcomes.
Right.
Then, maybe instead of saying how many man hours or women hours, you might get a positive outcome at the end of the day.
Right. So there's a shout out to all employers who are watching this.
Yeah.
Be kind also to your employees.
Our
especially
employees
those
are
who
at workplaces, maybe. Parents are at workplaces.
If I could add on
Yes.
also, if we go back to the point, which is that parents are more than parents, they're also an employee, they're also a person of their own, on their own as well. So it's like, not everyone will be available to take care of your child. And you may not trust me to also take care of your child as well. So also thinking about, so I actually met this lady who has children as well. And what she does is that she does not have lunch with her colleagues. Because for her is that I want to make sure that the moment I go home, I will be able to give my full attention to my children. And so what she will then do is that she'll eat at her desk, And what her colleagues would then do is that, can I offer to buy you coffee? Can I make sure, is there something you want me to tapao for you? And that actually creates that sense about, I want to also enjoy myself. I still want to have a nice cup of coffee sometimes. And yet I don't want to run out. Maybe someone can do that. And that increases my own wellness. And because I am well now, I can actually be well in parenting my children as well.
Actually, the examples you provide shows that anyone can be a village to anyone.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, correct.
Yes.
The examples you provided.
So the village is not just about caregiving, because also parents are also considerate about who should actually care for my children as well.
Yes.
So let's also consider, how can I care for you as a parent, as a person first? Yeah.
So if you don't feel ready to trust your child with someone else, but maybe you can ask for help to get that kind of support yourself, so that you can be the better version of a parent, right? That's important. That's an important reminder.
I think we've just been told we have 5 more minutes.
I know. 5 more minutes. Okay. So I'll
We are just getting into it.
okay. Second session. Okay. All right. So maybe we can just wrap up today's conversation. And I thought, for all 3 panelists to just share a short phrase or a short something that you want the parents to take away from this session. We've talked about so many things, right? Okay, I'll give you 10 seconds to think, okay?
10 seconds to think.
For me, I start first.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, I think today I'm just going to go home and do nothing with my children. Because doing nothing is not nothing, okay? There's a lot in it. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So what are we going to do after today, is that?
Yeah, what's one encouragement or something that you want to
I'll
take
go back and thank everyone in the village, especially the husband. Right? I feel that the fact that we're all ladies here, right? I mean, the fathers are always a bit forgotten, taken for a bit granted, also, right?
That's why we can be here, right?
Yeah, that's why we can be.
Good point, yes. I think for me, I wanted to say, you are doing okay.
Yeah.
And your child will be all right.
Yeah.
So be compassionate to ourselves.
Yes.
学会放过自己，也给自己少一点时间, right? And just be confident that the outcomes will, especially in Singapore, be a generally positive one.
I think I want to affirm that and truly believe that you are really doing the best that you can. And with that is sufficient. You will never get it right perfectly, and that's okay. And you don't have to do this by yourself. So think of it as your friends, as your village. Think of it as your partner, as your village. Think of us, having such webinars as your village as well. I think for us, it's also that sense about Children's Society, why we run the Think a Friend helpline and chat line. It's actually we see all types of people. So we see like the children from as young as 5 years old. We've seen adults, parents like yourself, sometimes also calling us, and we have never actually turned any of you away because we believe that in order for our children to thrive, you need to be well. So that's important.
Could I just add one last thing? I was thinking, right, if we fast forward, sometimes it helps to think about our lives in reverse also. I think if we fast forward and think about ourselves when we are older and our children are adults, and you imagine a conversation your child will have with you, I think if we had, given ourselves that opportunity, that space, and loved our child for who they are, I think our child will look at us and say, Mommy, I love you. Papa, I love you. Because you loved me and you did the best you could. I don't think any child will say, Mommy, I fought you for not sending me for tuition A, B, or C, or that, that you didn't send me for art class, or I don't think it's not this kind of things, but children know when you love them. Children know when you are there to support them. And in those final moments, I believe it is these things that matter.
Back to the little things.
So we are really cultivating a village today, right?
Yes,
by putting people together and sharing different stories, right? And what have you? I really, really like this.
I enjoyed today's session tremendously. I prepared one ending quote, but I think actually you all have much better quotations, but let's just put it up because I prepared it, right? To encourage all of us, right? Really, sometimes the most important thing that we can do for our children is actually to take care of ourselves. And how do we do that, right? By not, really putting undue stress, pressure, and finding our own village, or even being that village for others if we can afford the bandwidth to do so. And one more thing, maybe one more challenge that I pose to everybody here is really to have that conversation with our children, right? Like what MOS said. Go back today and ask your child, what is something that Mama or Papa have been doing that has been helpful to you? What is something that's not so helpful? Listen to them, and I think we will find some of the answers in their responses to us as well.
Yes.
Right.
Lovely.
Right.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for joining us over lunch. I hope you had a good meal, and I hope there was a lot of food for thought from today's session as well. I think we will just put up the QR code for feedback form. Like I said, Children's Society, we are hoping to run another 2 more webinar sessions this year, and this is where we hope you can co-create the sessions with us. And today's session is not, it doesn't just end at 1 p.m., right? Because you will hear from us later, about 1 to 2 weeks time, and we will be sending along, some activities and some reminders along the way. If you can, please participate in those as well, because I think it's really just that daily reminder that we need to be able to make our parenting journey a lot more fulfilling. So thank you so much. And in the feedback form, there's also a question. If you would like to speak with someone that you're currently facing some parenting struggles or challenges, let us know, and we'll be very happy to be in touch with you. So with that, please join me in thanking all the panelists on the virtual.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. And thank you very much, and see you again. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.